I'd like to introduce Associate Provost Morgan Himley, Associate Provost of International Education and Engagement, who's going to introduce you to Jorgen.
That's right. This is a new position that was created in the university as a way to mark the need to internationalize education at all levels, both on campus and abroad. So I'm very happy to be here. I've been here for a long time on the campus. I'm faculty from the place. But I've been here for a long time, but I'm happy to be taking this role up. And I'm particularly happy for SU Abroad to be hosting Professor Johansen. It's just a terrific honor to have him with us for these 3 days, and everything I've heard about the visit has been immensely successful. As you probably all know, or you might not be here, he has been doing international consulting and training in conflict prevention and resolution for over 30 years. He's held many academic appointments in very prestigious European universities, and he teaches the course that Sue talked about. And I also want to thank Sue for organizing these visits. Thank you very much. I'm glad that there are students here who've been in the course, and I hope they talk a little bit. Are you the students who've been in the course?
Two here.
Two there. Okay, great. That's fabulous. That's fabulous. I'm eager to hear about it from you. Professor Johansen. Sorry, I don't want to move this to you. Jorgen. Yeah, I've been calling you Jorgen the whole professor. Jorgen has published widely. He has a new book out, which I hope you get to take a look at Peace and Conflict Studies. It's a reader from Rutledge. And in the chapter that he has in that book, he says, over these last 30 years, almost every successful revolution that forced the old regime to step down was nonviolent. That is a very important and provocative claim. It's something important for us to be talking about today as we face a world driven by violences of all kinds, from war to struggles over human rights to environmental degradation and to global poverty. I think of all of those as violences. Among his many, many accomplishments, though, he remains, I think, and has always been at his core, a man who lives his values and his beliefs in daily, immediate, and courageous ways. He has worked in over 100 countries. He works with activist groups. He enters war zones to document what's going on, and he listens to people. He listens to the struggles that they're engaged in on a daily basis, in immediate ways, and the kinds of things they're doing to address those struggles. We have a lot to learn here today, and I'm very, very happy to be introducing him. The name of his conversation/talk is Successful Revolution to Contemporary Political Uses of Nonviolence. Please welcome him.
This is an enormous topic, and we have short time, so I have picked a few interesting focuses, some large scale and some small scale. And as was said here, I'm very happy if you could interrupt me, ask me questions, challenging me. Just stop me. Any means is okay? If I'm talking too much, just stop me and ask questions.
Can everyone hear?
Do you hear me? I can speak louder if you want. And if you're too shy to ask questions here, you send me an email later, okay? I normally will reply within 48 hours. I'm not up in the air or in the jungle. I'm connected most days. So please send me a question, a comment on anything relevant to this topic. Source for information or whatever. There are a number of non-violent movements worldwide, and we're going to look into a few of them. Some of these movements have been around for a long time, and some are quite young. They have worked under very different conditions, contexts, different regimes, and different culture and religious backgrounds. It's not something which is only functioning in a specific context. You find them absolutely everywhere. Not very well documented though, that's a problem. They've all faced consequences from governments and other authorities. The documentation thing is, for me, a serious problem. When I go to the libraries and I asked about books on how they divided Yugoslavia, we have 400 books and some 1,000 articles, because it was a very bloody conflict in the 90s. When I go to the same libraries and ask about how they divided Czechoslovakia, not a single book. No one died there, not documented, not studied. Even my peace research colleagues have a tendency to focus on the most deadly wars and not on the peace options. And that goes for almost all sorts of conflict studies. In relationships, individual conflicts, if the man beating his wife, that's part of the record, go to the police record and you just study. If you could solve the same conflict with your partner peacefully, no one recognizes it. They want us to recognize all conflicts. They are born equal and the same right to recognition. And we should study the best ones, not the most horrible ones, if you want to learn how to do it in the future. Many of them have violated present laws. People using non-violence frequently go to prison. Not all of them, but some key people in most struggles have been confronted with the present laws. They are criminals. Okay? Some are heroes, but still criminals. We'll look into a few of them. And they are celebrated victories and faced serious problems. This is not an easy way. This is not a guarantee for success. But I will come back to the success rate compared to violent means in a few minutes. Going long back, the slave trade, that struggle, when it was normal to buy and sell human beings on the market, that was opposed by a few people in the beginning. The majority said, this is necessary. We need this for the economy. It's important. But a few people started to oppose it. And you got a movement growing. The first country to abolish slave trade was Denmark. They had some small colonies in the West Indies. But then it went on. And today, slavery and slave trade is abolished as in all laws. It's illegal everywhere. Still, we have some sort of slavery, but not legally anymore. This was a non-violent movement, almost all of it. Quite successful and very important, of course, to raise awareness about the equality of human beings and so on. We have seen movements against specific wars. When the US had a war in Vietnam, there was a number of people opposing it after some time, not only in the US but worldwide. And the US did not lose the military battle in Vietnam. They could have nuked the country, killed every Vietnamese person if they wanted to. But it was politically impossible because of the opposition, because of the possible backfire effect. It was not the lack of military tools. The more violence they could have used. But in the end, it was impossible for them to continue, and they withdrew. And the movement was important. Most of that battle against this war happened in American homes, around the breakfast table. Young people said, I don't want to go over there, kill these Vietnamese farmers, they've never been harming me, and coming back in the body bag. That movement was very important, and it made it impossible for the government to continue that war. We have seen the movements for multi-party systems. This is from Tahrir Square in January last year, Egypt. Not the only one that I mentioned, several more 2 years later, but we have seen massive civil disobedience. They disobeyed the laws, stayed on the square week after week, and that was in a struggle to create a multi-party system, more democracy. Most democracies has been established through undemocratic means, through civil disobedience, massive mobilization of ordinary people. Democracy is not delivered by democratic means.
Well, I find it interesting that you call civil disobedience undemocratic. Are you saying that democracy is only voting?
No, but it's the core of it. And very few people will say that civil disobedience in itself is a democratic tool. It could improve democracy. I would even go so far, I would say democracy, to be worth the name, needs civil disobedience, needs a strong opposition. But the tool in itself, I can't call a democratic tool. It's very often a small minority was raising awareness about the problem by violating unjust laws. That's why I'm using this term. But a good point. We have seen movements for independence, and the Gandhian movement is of course the most famous one against the British Empire occupying India. One of the first colonies to be liberated, and at that time they had 300 million people. I'll come back to some of his ideas, but this was mainly a non-armed, peaceful movement, and they achieved what they wanted, an independent India. Still they have serious problems, and so on, but the struggle for independence was mainly the non-violent tools. We have seen non-violent movements against specific weapon systems. For example, landmines. The campaign worldwide to make landmines illegal was run by hundreds of NGOs, civil society actors, forcing the governments to have a serious discussion. And in the end, it was an international convention banning landmines. Some countries have not signed it. Russia, China, US, Israel, and a few more. But enough have signed that convention, so it's legally binding for all countries. A few years ago, we even had some guerrilla movements to sign the treaty in Kashmir. 2 of them signed and promised not to use landmines in the struggle. It's an important part, and it's a very successful story. It took a few years, and they made these weapons illegal. We have seen against occupation and massacres. Second World War, the yellow star they forced the Jews to carry. In Denmark, the civil part of the resistance movement were able to take almost every Jew out of Denmark, smuggle them into Sweden, which was not in war, and almost all of them survived. That was a non-violent movement to support a specific group that the Nazi regime would like to kill. Most of the countries, they were arrested and sent to Germany to concentration camps. Norway collected most of these Germans. Extremely obedient Norwegian police forces were more effective than most of the countries in Europe. But Denmark is a very good example. There was a successful story in the Danish resistance movement to save the Jews from ending their lives in the gas chambers. And of course, you have seen non-violence against segregation and other injustices. Without Rosa Parks, I can't imagine the possibility to elect Obama to presidency 3 years ago. Thanks to her and her civil disobedience, her courage to oppose the injustices, it was possible for the large majority to, in the end, have the president of color in this country. And he thanked her when he was giving his first speech. She died a few years earlier, but he had the courage to say, thanks to her and her sisters and other people in that movement, it was possible for us to have a president of color in this country. And it's difficult to imagine a movement for desegregation run by arms, Kalashnikovs and that. This must be done by non-violent means, of course. Poland, the first communist regime to be dismantled in Eastern Europe, the Solidarity movement from 1980 to 1989. Poland had a long history of violent uprisings against the Tsar, against the Russian leadership. In 1980, Lech Walesa worked in the shipyard in Gdansk as an electrician, and he said, let's go on strike and demand independent trade unions. Later they had a list of 21 demands, including a change of the whole regime. It went up and down, long history. There are some books out about that struggle. But in 1989, he was elected president in a more democratic country. That was the first of the communist dictatorships in Eastern Europe to fall. Non-violent struggle, they decided to use non-violent techniques after long discussions. They have meetings with Western European women's movement, trade unions, peace movement people, environmental movement people. And they said, let's try. Let's see if we could challenge the communist regime with non-violent with their tools. And they made it. And then of course you have Philippines, 86, Marcos, people power. The elections were frauded, and Corazon Aquino organized her followers to take to the streets. Enormous demonstrations. And Corazon Aquino were always dressed in this strong yellow color. She was called the canary bird. Because on every public meeting and the TV, it was strong yellow color. And when Marcos made demonstrations illegal in Manila and other cities, she asked her followers to start jogging in the weekend, but take on a yellow t-shirt. And it was okay to have a few hundred of them. Then you had a few thousand. Then you had 100,000 yellow t-shirts jogging on the weekend in Manila. And half the army said, I take the point. We support Corazon Aquino and not Marcos anymore. Very tense situation for some time. And then the rest of the army said, okay, we leave Marcos. And he had to leave the country. Very important and exciting peaceful revolution in the Philippines, 86. The Berlin Wall, the symbol of the division of Europe, the symbol of the Cold War, that was a big thing. I was there, not in November, but I celebrated New Year, 89-90. And that was a big party. I don't think I was sober for a week, but this was really something to celebrate. I've been supporting the opposition movements in Eastern Europe since the 70s, smuggling letters and books and all that stuff, and suddenly you saw that symbol going down. That was really something to celebrate. Peaceful overthrowing of the communist regime. Less well known is the wave of peaceful revolutions in sub-Saharan Francophone countries, former French colonies, started in Benin, 1989. They just celebrated the French Revolution, 1789. Big conferences, books produced, newspaper articles, and people in Benin said, well, that's a good idea, let's do it again. And they saw what was happening in Eastern Europe. They saw that people in China dared to oppose the communist regime on Tiananmen Square. Even if that ended in the massacre, these people said, let's do the same here. And that was a successful transition with non-violent means into a multi-party system in 1990. More of the Francophone colonies followed after that. Serbia 2000. NATO, US, a number of European countries bombed Serbia in 1999. Illegal war, no support from the UN Security Council, and the aim was to get rid of Milosevic. He stayed put. Was not removed by that bombing. But the students in Serbia next year said, let us try a different way. They organized a strong movement called the Otpor movement to remove Milosevic. And they succeeded. On the 5th of October, it was gone. It's a fascinating movie, if you want to see that, Bringing Down the Dictator. I think you could either download from Pirate Bay or whatever. You find that movie on the net. On the net if you want. Saffron Revolution in Burma, 2007. Not the first one, but the big one. The monks took the lead. Fascinating story as well. They didn't achieve independence or liberation or getting rid of the dictatorship, but you see a few years later, 2011, 2012, the Burmese dictatorship is on the move. Open up for multi-party systems, for free elections, more free speech. And that's of course an effect, because they're afraid of the next time these people take to the streets. Okay, this was just a few examples. I'm not going through the whole world history. But in all of these, there's a question of power, political power. That's a big topic. If you study political science or sociology or whatever you study, political power is a core thing to discuss. What does it mean? What is it? How to cope with it? How to use it? Defining it. There are too many books on that topic to be referred here, but at least you could separate power over and power to. I realized that when I was 18. Maybe a little late, but I was quite slow when I was young. Because I was getting a letter from my government saying, we want you to join the army. And I said, no, thank you. I don't think that's a nice way to solve conflicts, to kill people. So I was taken to court. I got 16 months in prison. I was sitting there with people who have been committing murders. I refused to kill. We were in the same prison. And that made some really good thinking in my head. Because I realized they had the power to punish me, but I had the power to decide if I should be a soldier or not. The whole NATO system, the nuclear bombs, everything they had, could not make a soldier out of Jorgen. I said no thank you, and that's it. I was stronger than them. An enormous good feeling when you're an 18-year-old confronting the military system in the world. And that's a different kind of power. The power to punish me, but not to make a soldier out of me. And that's something we all should maybe reflect on now and then. Give a lot of power ourselves if we decide to follow our inner voice. The main idea with this question of power when it comes to non-violent strategies, power being dependent on cooperation. I have some power in this room today because you're listening to me. Influence your mindsets. Be careful. But you see, if you start to sing, you wouldn't hear my voice. If you left the room, I couldn't talk to all of you. We just do like this. You won't hear me. I'm dependent on you being obedient and cooperating with me. That goes for all types of political power. You could refuse. That will have consequences for you, depending on the context. And the Gandhian idea, when he was challenging the British Empire, he said, it's like the old Greek temple. The power structure is based on pillars. People are paying their taxes, people are working, military doing their job, police doing their job, people are obedient, following orders. The bureaucracy is functioning, and a number of other pillars. Without these pillars, the system will not exist. Okay? So the idea from Gandhi, and developed even more by people later, is identify these key pillars and attack them by non-cooperation. One of the main actions by Gandhi was to refuse paying salt tax. If you stop paying taxes, you are reducing this pillar, and the system is not that stable anymore. Or if you saw the Polish case, when Poland went on strike, also in Egypt in January, people doesn't work anymore. Only a few pillars left, okay? Problems for the power holders. In Egypt you saw massive civil disobedience. They refused to follow orders. The bureaucracy stopped functioning. People stay home or join the activists on the streets. And then there is only two pillars left, police and the military, to support the dictatorships. When they started to crackle, then that is the end of the power structure. It collapsed. Maybe it looks funny and too easy, but this is the core of the theory of non-cooperation developed by Gandhi and onwards. Identify support pillars, remove them or weaken them, and in the end, the system will collapse. That is how we are thinking. I saw this in Palestine a few years ago, the model. It was in Yemen. Some people from Fatah, a few underground Hamas people, and a number of young students. And I said, this is interesting, Jorgen, but it doesn't function in Palestine. maybe function everywhere else, but not in our context. And why is that, I said? It's a young a student from Ramallah, a woman, and she said, no, because in our case, this power structure is held up by a big crane. Someone from outside are keeping up that occupation from outside. Doesn't matter if you remove all these pillars, the power structure will still be there. And of course, that was a very good and relevant point. But that crane is based in Washington, D.C. And that's also based on pillars. So next step is to attack those pillars, of course. It doesn't weaken the theory, just need to expand a little. And we have similar cases in several places around the world. But I still argue that you could use the same theory, identify the support system, and try to weaken them or attacking them or removing them. Civil society actors, they're not only using non-violence to change the regimes, but they're doing it for a number of different things. On the regime level, we have seen 6 waves, I call them waves, maybe not accurate, after the Indian Revolution, 1947. And for US students and faculty members, it's an important point that all of them are under researched. It's a lot of interesting topics here for PhD students, MA students, to write a thesis, or apply for grants and doing research programs on some of these cases. I don't have a complete list because that would be too long. But just to identify what I mean with these waves. The first one from 1980. Poland, Bolivia 84, 83, Uruguay 84, Philippines 86, and 2001 again. There are, why put them in one group? It is discussed, but for me it was important to see the Catholic Church playing a very important role in Poland. They got a Catholic Pope for the first time. He came to Poland, he had the mess outside the shipyard in Gdansk. He gave them courage and some moral strength. And I don't know for sure what else the Catholic Church did, but I'm quite sure it was more. I've tried to access the archives in the Vatican, but I'm refused access to them for the moment. Maybe next generation will have access to see what happened. But we also have these other Catholic countries. And I know that when Lech Walesa got the Nobel Peace Prize, he invited activists from Bolivia and Uruguay to the ceremony in Oslo. So they had obviously good relations. I've been discussing how to do it. The next wave is the 89 and Eastern Europe. Some of the countries that were liberated with non-violent means, mainly. We could add some more to that wave. And then we have seen a wave in sub-Saharan Africa, as I mentioned, starting in Benin, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Senegal, Mali, Malawi, Madagascar. We could discuss it, we should add some more to that list as well. Then, 4, the Colored Revolution, Serbia 2000, Georgia 2003, Ukraine 2004, Kyrgyzstan and Lebanon 2005. Change of regimes, massive mobilization of ordinary people in the streets. Number 5 is not that well recognized, but that is due to the financial crisis. In Iceland, 2 years ago, people stood outside the parliament, the Althing, 8 weeks in the winter time until the government and the parliament resigned. It was economic collapse, the corruption of governmental level and the bank system. And people are out of jobs, extreme high inflation, and they forced the government to step down. And it went on to Latvia, Hungary, Czech Republic, and it could be more. People have faced serious consequences due to the bad economy. And the last wave, at least we could mention the first 2 names, Tunis and Egypt, but I guess Yemen is 4, and it could be more. This is just an indication that most successful revolutions the last 30 years have been carried out without the use of guns. If you list the number of armed revolutions in the same period, it's not that many. It's less than 5 who have been successful. Yes, please.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Isn't it the fact that these non-violent movements are again a byproduct of democratic values? When I see it in the Indian context, the Britishers have started in India the representative style of democracy which was not present before the Britishers. So they gave those local government acts, local government freedom of associations. So in that way, people have come up with the idea that, okay, if we associate, we can topple a regime.
I don't think there is a general rule here. You need to look into every single case. These are cases from very different parts of the world, different political contexts, different state systems, and they are all unique cases. There's something in common. They removed the old regime, but they also are very unique. So I can't answer you in a more general way. Please.
I have two questions. First,
Loud, I'm an old man, bad hearing, okay?
okay. So the first one is, do you see that? Are you only studying when the revolutions happened and not the aftermath of it? Like Iran is not part of this. Is it because they didn't go into democracy, but it's the Iranian revolution was non-violent?
Mainly non-violent, and they got what they wanted, theocracy.
So
We still
why
have
is
it. Not democracy, but theocracy.
Okay.
And I've been studying it, and I don't have it in my list. This is not a complete list, as I said. I'd be happy to include that, but it doesn't belong to any of these waves. I just try to give you the broad picture. But there are more cases to add.
And my other question is, you're labeling it non-violent when the protesters themselves, the revolutionary, use violence, not the regime.
Excellent point. That's what I'm doing. When they don't respond with violent means for the opposition. Most of them have been confronted with brutal police forces or militaries. Yes, please.
I have a question about the North Korea. North Korea only stands with the military forces and the police power, but they don't collapse. Actually, the third generation dictators coming in, and people in the North Korea are not violent at all. And so, in the international community, people we have to offer the humanitarian action services to the suffering North Korean people. Some people oppose it, don't help the North Korean government. It seems that there is no possibility of civic movement in North Korea.
I believe it is, but it takes time to build up. You see, you need training and education to use non-violent means. For soldiers, they're expected to have at least 1 year of training before you send them to the battlefield. There is no reason to believe you need less preparation to be good and effective non-violent activist. And that's lacking in North Korea for the moment. A number of other countries as well. But this is not something you do out of your head. This is serious strategies developed, planning and training. It can't happen out of nowhere.
Why do you think things happen in waves? And what does that say about
Inspiration.
social
I have seen the student activists in Serbia.
Yeah.
They went to Georgia
I see.
and helped them to develop. And they went on to Ukraine and so on. There are links. Not always very, very clear, but you can identify from the inspiration that's been moving on.
And actual people,
Oh yeah, and people as well.
leaders.
Related to Lala's question, how do you define success?
Okay, very good question. Could we wait a few minutes and coming back to that in a few slides? It's not an easy question to answer. But if you ask the people on the streets in these peak revolutions, they would say, get rid of the old system. That is a success for them. That's a serious problem. But the main challenge is to replace the old system. And they are not united on that. Look at Egypt. There are 140 political parties today. They can't agree on how to run the country after Mubarak has left. So how to measure the success is a difficult one. I normally in my studies have been measuring what they asked, what they said they would like to achieve, measuring it 2 years later. But it could be done differently.
And is this what they want, a goal, which, or a position? Like,
Both.
is-
It will depend.
I was thinking about Occupy the Wall Street movement and Occupy Everything Else movement. They're also trying to get rid of the old system. They're non-violent. On the other hand, they do not define exactly what the new system is about. So do you see a difference between financial non-violent movements and political?
I'm going to meet some of them in New York City on Friday, but my point for the moment is I think we should look on the Occupy movement so far as a part of the educational package. They will come back in a few years, but now they are training, try to organize, learning from mistakes. Hopefully they will be stronger next time, but I could be wrong. Yes, sir.
The operations of non-violent movements, particularly in Africa, is basically slightly more different from the theories that you are postulating. Let me just highlight some of the issues that I've personally witnessed. In our own governing structures, the governments tend to create and recreate rival non-violent structures whenever a non-violent movement emerges. And therefore, whilst you are creating a non-violent movement within the state structure itself and the dictatorships are also creating an adversary non-violent movement to counteract the efforts of the public. That's one version. And then there's a strategic design, perhaps not almost similar to the pillar that was pulling up the power structure. That also occurs, which is capital motivated from far beyond the structures of the governing structures, particularly in Africa. Therefore, the focus of the non-violent structure is obscured. You don't know who you are fighting anymore. Are you fighting the government? Are you fighting the capitalist economies? Are you fighting the Chinese capital that is flocking into Africa? You don't know who you are targeting anymore.
It's a very good point. I don't agree that it's the same for all African cases, and you see some similarities with other cases as well outside Africa. But that is if you give him a couple of weeks, we're happy to go into more of these cases and discuss more details. I'm just giving you an overall picture, you know. Hopefully you will be interested enough to start to study yourself. I have to move on a little. I have promised to stay within an hour. 6 conventional wisdoms. If you look on the textbooks you're using in political science, you will find violent insurgency is very effective. They use violence because they must. All insurgencies begin non-violently and adopt violence when non-violent resistance fails. Resistance movements have adopted violence to take on brutal regimes. Societies need quick and decisive victories to be stable enough for democracy to thrive. And all insurgents can be persuaded to substitute non-violent for violent resistance. This is what, if you summarize books on these types of conflicts, this is what you find, okay? I will challenge all of them. I don't have time today, I will just pick a few of them, but this is what you find in most textbooks. They are mainly written by people who doesn't understand the non-violent strategies. Here are from Stanford University, a main program going on comparing non-violent and violent campaigns from 1900 to 2006. Success stories, in average, 20% to 21% for the violent ones, almost 50, 47 I think it is, for the non-violent. Partial success, see here. Failure, you see here. This is empirical data from a youth program run by Erika Chanot. I will give a reference to the data set later. This is very interesting because we haven't seen it on paper. Some of us have been thinking in these terms, but now we have some people studying it from a quantitative perspective with the data sets. And this is, when I'm talking to, I've been in his country, in Colombia many times, talking to the guerrilla movements there, and they believe in the Kalashnikov. Okay? They say that's the only thing you could do in Colombia. And I talk about non-violence. Well, we tried non-violence in the 60s and the 70s and a couple of times in the 80s. It doesn't function here. So we need to keep to the Kalashnikov. And I said, how could you put aside non-violence after 5 experiments and you still believe in the Kalashnikov? That has failed in 42 years. Why do you still believe in it? And they're silent for a couple of minutes. And then we have a very good discussion. But there's something with the human mindset, specifically the Marxists. They think that violence is always more effective and that will end. There are so many failures. And still they believe in it for some reason. And I think the lack of good understanding on how these different means are functioning. If you move on to success rates by decades, more or less equal 40 to 49, 50 to 59, and from here on, the 60s, you see the non-violent are much more successful than average. That is not to say you will always have a success, but the picture is quite clear. If you want to remove a dictatorship, if you want to have a huge campaign, violence is not the way to do it. This is number 4 I mentioned, the brutality. Non-violent resistance movements must adopt violence to take the leadership. That's wrong. The empirical record tells us non-violent campaigns facing repression are over 46% likely to succeed. Because of the backfire effect, when the regime used brutal violence against unarmed citizens from their own country, it backfired on them. Unsustainable in the long run. Abandoning non-violent discipline can undermine the backfire. That's why I'm worried about Syria today. That's why I was very critical to what developed in Libya. Yes, please.
Could you return to the previous slide, please?
Let me try. That one?
Now, there seems to be a trend in favor of nonviolence in the latter half of the 20th century and into the 21st century. Can you link that to like global trends? Like, I mean, we know the world's population is growing rapidly. We know the resources are depleting rapidly, but there must be other trends that are facilitating these rising percentages for nonviolence.
We don't know that yet. We are still looking into it, and we are developing this database. And Erika, who's running it, she's just got funding to employ 22 full-time staff members to work on this data. So we will have some better results in a few years' time.
Could you hazard some guesses?
Yeah, my guess is that the success stories from here has inspired people, and they've seen it looks better. They have achieved some goals. Let's try the same. But we're still just testing out. I mean, the military means are quite well developed. They have a big budget and they are doing development and research. On non-violent techniques, there's almost nothing happening. They're still repeating what Gandhi did in the 1920s to a certain degree. So there's much more to be done to develop non-violent techniques. And there are, of course, some new challenges that are creating conflicts for us around the world. For example, the water supply or other resources. So there are some problems. But we're looking into it and we're going to be more specific in the effect on these different things. Yes, please.
It looked like 1990 there was a significant change, and I wonder if the end of the Cold War had something to do with that.
Could be. I still don't know, but it could be. Because the number of cases around 89, Soviet Union fall apart. You got 15 new states in the world. I mean, the number of states is interesting in itself. When the UN was created, it had 54 members. Today, close to 200. These are nations who want to be states, have independence. They're growing. There are maybe 2,000 nations in the world with some demands for independence or autonomy. The possibility for new states are quite high. That's different from my speech. Not the time. Well, post-conflict regime types, that's partly your question. Probability of being democratic 5 years after the conflict has ended. With violent struggles, the guerrilla fights, 4%. Non-violent, 41%. This is for every case from 1900 to 2006. That's a good record. You see, when Africa was liberated, it was mainly the guerrilla warfare, the Kalashnikovs. They fought against the European colonizers. But these guerrilla fighters, after 40 years in the jungle, when they should be the new leaders, they created very militaristic states. More or less one-party communist dictatorships in every case of Africa. Some of them hasn't taken off the uniform yet. They're still believing in the military system. Far from democracy. That has a relationship with the mean state.
So non-violent 41%.
Yeah.
59% is not democracy yet. So what's going to happen to them?
We don't know yet. We need better preparation, more training, more research. So when you have done your PhD on one of these topics, you will know more about it. Okay? Looking forward to the book. Please send me a copy. And the last one, post-conflict civil war onset. The probability of experiencing a civil war within 10 years of the end of the conflict. After violent campaigns, 43% had a civil war. After non-violent campaigns, 28% had civil wars.
You have mentioned in the beginning, among the examples, the movement against segregation, for example,
Yep.
which, so I'm a bit confused about the success part in terms of, measuring it with democracy. So I don't really feel that this is...
I give you the reference in a few minutes, and you go into the more recent article, and you get more specific what I mean. Is that okay? I think it's a good point. A little short of time, I'm sorry for that. Here is the main article, Why Civil Resistance Works, the strategic logic of nonviolent conflict by Maria Stefan and Erika Schenerot, International Security, Volume 33, Issue 1, and they produced a book in November last year on the same topic with much more information in it. You find that on Amazon, okay? Very important book. It has the data and the discussions on how to understand these figures and the cases they've been picking us up. But follow these people because they are going to publish a lot of interesting stuff in the years to come. It's an absolutely new development within the studies of nonviolence. To use empirical data, quantitative analysis, and presenting the results. But we also see it in a number of other movements. The nuclear power. This is outside the main office in Brussels. That was a social movement trying to stop building new nuclear power stations. And of course they were helped by Harrisburg and Chernobyl and so on. But for many years there was stop on building new ones. Now they're discussing it again due to global warming, and a new movement coming up. But I would argue these people using nonviolent means were quite successful for a number of years in the 90s and early 2000s to stop building new nuclear power stations. That was the goal, and they achieved it in most countries, not everywhere. But globally, the numbers of power stations went down. For those opposing air pollution, when Greenpeace first time climbed up in the chimney, a genius action, got headlines all over the place, front page of the main newspapers, CNN, everyone had it, and they raised awareness about this problem. In those days, people said, it's air enough. Next wind, just blow it away. Don't care about it. But these activists said, this is a serious problem. You're polluting the whole globe. And they raised awareness. Today you have strict laws in most countries. due to these front runners who raised the question, put it up on the political agenda, and created awareness, and added by research. I know this guy who's hanging here to keep the banner straight, he got $10,000 in fines. And he said, no problem, I will pay the double if necessary, to raise awareness, to get that effect. Forest. They're cutting down the rainforest. This movement started in India, the Shipko movement in the Himalayas. These women hugging the trees. The timber companies came, and they protected that forest. In the end, they won the struggle. And you see that movement popping up all over the place where you have some rainforests. I was recently in Australia, it's from Tasmania. 40 meters above the ground level, they are living in tents. You can't cut down the trees without killing them. This is to raise awareness about the problem of cutting down the rainforest. Non-violent movements try to develop new tools, having impact on the political agenda in different countries. And you see it everywhere. Iran, for human rights. Don't trust your newspaper when you come to Iran. There are a number of nice people there doing good jobs. And they need support, solidarity. Help them. They are facing serious problems. Some of the students have developed some interesting dilemma actions. The dilemma action is when what you do is difficult for authorities to cope with. For example, they are standing on the rooftops in Tehran at 7 o'clock in the evening and they're shouting, Allah Akbar! God is great. Everyone knows this is to protest against the priesthood, but they can't arrest young Muslims shouting Allah Akbar. That's what they're expected to do. So the government can't take them. That's a dilemma for the government. An interesting type of action and demonstration. I think my last picture is from China. 1.3 billion people, communist dictatorship. You remember the Olympic Games and the main stadium, bird nest. When they should build that, one guy refused to sell his house and he stayed there for 7 weeks. He lost in the end, but for me it's an inspiration. A single person opposing the government of China, saying, I lived here for 7 generations, this is my house, don't take it away from me. His wife gave him food with a rope and a basket. And in the end he came to helicopter and took him out. But for me this is something strong. I mean, who had the courage to oppose the government of China and say, I don't move. We need more people like him. I'm in principle against cloning human beings, but maybe he's an exception. And because Andy, my friend, is here, I was challenged this morning to tell a couple of stories, personal stories about nonviolence, and they are from a small country up in the north of Europe, conflict between the state and the individual. That means Jorgen and Norway. We want to develop new forms of actions. We wanted to use humor. We want to have good results, quick. I'm not sure they want to use non-violence. I'm not sure you should copy them, but maybe they could inspire you. The situation was, I've been acting in the peace movement, environmental movement. I've been arrested several times when I was young. And I had the same lawyer every time. He became a very good friend of mine. And one day he called me and said, hi Jorgen, I decided to refuse my military service as well. Oh good! People seem to think differently about the military system. So my lawyer refused his military service. And he said, I have a court case coming up against me very soon. Could you help me? I said, yeah, but you could defend yourself. You're a lawyer by profession. You have been having hundreds of these cases before. What could I do? I don't want you to be my lawyer. I want you to be my prosecutor, he said. But I can't be your prosecutor. That's impossible. Can't we try? Well, so the morning of his case, I called the real prosecutor in his private home, 7:30 in the morning. And I pretended to be from the courtroom, so I said, the case is delayed 2 weeks due to sickness. So he didn't turn up. Then I went to his office, and I stole one of these black robes. He has done them in Norway. And then I went into the courtroom at 9 o'clock, and I had a full audience of my friends, and I pretended to be the prosecutor. For 4 hours, I was the rude prosecutor saying, when even lawyers are refusing military service, we should double the punishment. Don't give him 16, give him 32 months. And I was really overplaying my role as a real prosecutor. We had the video camera hidden in the room. After 4 hours, we went home and then went to the media. So this was the newspaper from the day after. And when these headlines came, of course, I was fined. I was accused for pretending to be a public officer and disrespect for the court. That gives a minimum of 3 months imprisonment. Everyone was laughing, and I get access to every TV sofa in the country. I could speak about my case and everything. Very free access to media. Half a year later, I got a letter saying the case is laid down due to lack of evidence. They didn't want me there. So I appealed. I wrote a letter saying, I confess what I've done. Here is a copy of my video, and I want the case. No way, didn't want me back in the courtroom. Few months later, a friend of us was sitting in prison for his 16 months for refusing military service, and we wanted to do a new action with more humor. Our demand was cut down these horrible punishments for people who refuse military service. He was in prison, and we went to the prison in Oslo with ladders and ropes, and we jumped into the prison, demanding to be imprisoned, climbing over the walls, jumping in. And the alarm went on, the dogs came out, and a lot of guards came out and said, what are you doing here? They were afraid we should try to have some people getting out. But we said, we want to be in prison. Our friend is in there, he is there for his conviction. We have the same conviction. We want to stay with him. Get out. Not accepted. So after some time, the police came, of course, and they got very upset. Didn't want to follow us. So I was sitting on the top and others were on the inside. The boss of the prison came out and said, what are you doing here? We want to be in prison. Sorry guys, I don't have space for you. He said that my prison is full. We could share a room. I said we could sleep on the floor. To the end I was arrested. And here they carried me out of the prison. Taken to the police station, and I was accused for illegal entrance to private property. And of course, again, the case was laid down due to lack of evidence. They didn't want me back to tell what I've done. But the last one's a little different than the first case, because the first case was just embarrassing for them. Then I had to be prosecutor. But this time, it's difficult to imagine a court against me, or the case against me. What sort of punishments did they give me? I asked to be imprisoned, so that was not a punishment for me. So in some way I removed the possibility to punish me. But don't do it here in the US. I mean, they will shoot you the way down. But for me, it's just to show you, you don't need to look for the revolutionary goals. You could use non-violence in a small scale, your personal conflicts, a number of different contexts. There are so much more to do in the field of non-violent actions. And there is more to come in Strasbourg this summer, 4 weeks. And that is the strawberry season in Strasbourg. You like the strawberries and the chocolate. Okay, that was what I have thought about.